Hello, everyone. I'm Andy, coming to you from the United Kingdom.
And I'm Scott, coming to you from Canada.
And this is the T and Timbits podcast, global perspectives on business development to help you prosper. And speaking of prospering, part of that is prospecting. And we are going to continue our monthly theme of prospecting. And we will be starting with the fundamentals of prospecting. But before we get into that, Scott is going to tell us a story.
Before we get back to Professor Andy, looking forward to that conversation. Yes, thank you. I was a bit distracted clicking the wrong buttons as we started this episode. I also clicked the button to start the music and then sat back in my chair and realized I'd forgotten to turn both of our cameras on. So then I was thankfully able to recover, which has nothing to do with my story, and which was I was delaying for time.
It's okay. I was going to let you get away with that. It was very clear, but I thought he's going to carry on. He's going to carry on, but you gave it away.
In a second, but I don't have a segue. It is about asking for forgiveness, not permission. Not saying you want to do it all the time, but I have just been sort of stymied and held back and a bit frustrated by a couple of scenarios lately that were quite low risk scenarios where the progress was being delayed because we were dependent on trying to involve somebody else in what we were doing. So one example is producing content. We try very hard to collaborate on content when we can at work as part of our prospecting, and a lot of times you want to make sure that what was captured was reasonable by the other person's measure. You don't want to put anything out there that they would necessarily disagree with, and sometimes we get a little bit too wrapped up in establishing that certainty and unnecessarily. And I'm like, listen, like, they were there when the recording happened. They were there to weigh into the substance in the moment. You don't need to then check with them after the fact to have them watch if you publish it and they're like, they come back to me like, oh, I really don't like, well, then pull it down. Like, so progress in that regard is better than perfection. The second related example was we are organizing our own customer and prospecting event. I'm very excited about this. It was really easy to pick a date, give it a name, put up the website, but we're now into the stage which is infinitely more difficult, which is getting people who have enthusiasm to register for the event. And we're trying to do that by generating interest in using the networks of the people that are participating in the event. And there's relationships there that we're trying. And I said, just start mentioning, just start sharing, just start tagging, just start putting something out there and getting those people to interact with it and notice it on social media so that they get the network effect of amplifying it into their networks and start to sort of grow the reach that way without needing to be quite so formal and process driven about lining this all up. I think the event's going to be great. If we do it next year, we'll get a little bit more tight about these things and scheduled and whatnot, but let's be a little bit more raw and real about it at the same time. And I think that will one, give us more momentum and be just as effective. So kind of related, kind of the theme of don't let perfection be the enemy of the good, but also it's more about advancing the ball rather than having the perfect play to try and score on every play.
I think that is very relevant to what we're talking about as well, because we are talking about the fundamentals of prospecting today. And one of the biggest issues I find with the companies that I work with is that they often get stuck at this phase.
Right.
And the prospecting itself doesn't actually happen because they're far too busy trying to build that perfect plan, do the perfect research, get the perfect data before they actually start taking any action. And that's really not what we're pushing for. We're saying do these basic things, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And when you've done that, get going. And, if it means that you have to keep going back and redoing it or adjusting it, then fine. But don't get stuck in this phase. What is your desired outcome for this bit?
Look for so much certainty. And maybe that's like what I want people to get out of it, which is like you need to, you're not going to get a specific answer here. Listen, if I knew exactly where my customers were, exactly how to reach them, exactly what to say to them, exactly how to convince them to buy, then I'd be in a completely different field, or I'd be doing living in a completely different place, kind of thing. Like that is the challenge. That is the work. And there are certain elements in and collaborators and colleagues within your business that operate differently. When you're in production, when you're in finance, it is specific. You can add it all up. You can reconcile. You can count. You can organize. You can assemble. It is very precise. In this, you're never going to get close to that same precision. And when you're trying to, when you're working with a leadership team that is used to thinking, talking, organizing that way, it can hold you back. So in this sense, this is something that we want everybody to just start working on and advancing and iterate on. It's much more effective when it can be done that way. So find the one thing that you think you can advance today and do it. That's what I want people to take away.
Almost want to end it there. It's so inspiring. But I think we have to actually share some of the topics that we want to talk about as well.
Well, getting into the fundamentals, let's lay the groundwork of like how we think we want people to
Exactly. I mean, for me, it all starts with that research, and like I say, that is the bit that people get stuck in. Once they start doing that, they're there's so much information to find. And so much information that you can go through that you can get stuck in that bit, and you can become overwhelmed by it.
Let me challenge you a little bit right here. So when you're in business, you want to know where you're headed and you want to find the opportunity. And I think there's a bit of a chicken and an egg situation. I think there's a textbook way to do this when you're starting a new business. But why would you do that before you would you first get a little bit tighter and formal about your brand, your offering, your tone, your style, the sort of the shape of the narrative? Would that guide the way you do the research, or is it the other way around?
Well, I'm very much of the opinion that the research will guide what you do, how you do it, with the prospecting side of things, but with the business as a whole. And this should be something that is done on a relatively regular basis, using the advanced analytics. So making sure that you have advanced analytics to look at your market and your business and the sector that you're in, keeping on top of that, using market intelligence to sort of pinpoint those high potential leads, and the sector, the size of businesses, the location of your prospects and things like that. But also trying to understand organizational priorities, looking at what's going on in the news, if there's been any leadership changes in your target customers, if there are continuing evolutions in business, in industries, and in prospective customers. And so failing to do that research and then going ahead and going, this is how we are going to be, this is how we're going to look, this is how we're going to represent ourselves, may not be in line with how the market is, and can actually hold you back potentially in that prospecting process. So I would say do the research first. It may be that it's not quite as in-depth because you're just going, are we still in the right place? Yes, we are. Okay, right, let's get our brand, our message, and everything else sorted. Right, now let's drill down a little bit more into our target customers. Fine, it goes hand in hand, but I would definitely say that this is a starting point.
So I just want to inject pragmatism and practicality into what you're saying. I don't disagree, but I also know people who would just geek out on all that research and would never lift their heads.
Absolutely.
The brand, the market, the customer, the competition, the international opportunities, the quality, like you could do nothing but research. And so I think you have to be really careful about drawing a line about where you're at in the cycle,
Absolutely.
and whether you're doing an annual strategic plan, or whether you're doing a monthly campaign, or you're doing a daily activity of about to have a prospecting call. That's different kind of research. But I do agree, fundamentally, understanding what you're doing is the best, most solid foundation that you can give yourself in order to find success. So if we're still on fundamentals, so you're nodding, you're agreeing with that qualification.
I am. Yeah, absolutely.
We had sort of a bit of a recognition there that really being clear and intentional about your brand is part of that, and they kind of reinforce each other. The other things that we wanted to layer into fundamentals here was adopting thought leadership, SEO, and then some of the other sort of activities that you can do to sort of build the audience. We talked about influencers, and then we also talked about making sure that you're doing the right kind of follow-up along the way. And I think that's a point that's going to resonate as we continue these topics throughout the month of April. So talk to me now that you've kind of done the research, you've got a good sort of, at least some sort of formal articulation of your brand. Some businesses have formal brand strategies, formal brand guidelines, definitions, but not all. If you don't, it doesn't need to be much. It just needs to be written down, at least in something you can reference, if not share with a colleague. You've got that in place. You need to move into the next layer of that fundamental, advancing some thought leadership. How does that layer up?
Well, the great thing is once you got to that point, then it's about producing the white papers, the industry reports, and taking the research that you've done and repackaging that into valuable information that you can then share with your customers, that you can then share with your prospects, that you are then not only able to share externally, but also internally, because your own organization needs to be aware of what's going on, why you're taking a certain direction, why you're targeting certain customers in a certain niche, and making sure that your prospective customers are aware of the market situation as a whole and gaining value from interacting with you and from interacting with your brand, your business, and well, of course, then they start to see you as a trusted authority in that niche. So whether they're working with you or not, they still see you as a valuable source of information, and ultimately that will drive them to, well, why would we want to work with anyone else if these guys know everything about the market?
Absolutely. And I really like the point you made there about like using the research that you've just done in order to feed your thought leadership. So many times that gets disconnected, and it is, or it's seen as, well, this is my competitive advantage. This is what I know that other people don't know. I've just invested in figuring this all out. I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to say it out loud. I'm not going to publish it.
Funny.
Right? You've got to get past that, right? We're not talking about some patent here that you've got a monopoly on. Like, we're talking about your competitors are definitely the ones that are a real threat anyway, doing this too. They're smart, they're sophisticated, they're going to beat you to it. If you do that kind of research, if it's about customers, the market, the product, the need, what have you, put it on a list for your thought leadership. Use that work not just to inform your strategy, but also to support it tactically.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, just think how many times we have produced an episode, and then a few days later, we've seen a very, very similar episode from a similar sort of podcast.
Right.
Because they've done the research. They've gone, oh, this is obviously a topic that's relevant at the moment.
Yeah.
That's really good information there, and then they put their spin on it. But essentially, very often you'll find that a lot of business podcasts, they tend to follow similar themes at similar times because they're doing that research and coming up with the same information and just putting their own spin on it. Yeah, I just like to think that we're at the front of that and that people are listening to us and stealing our ideas.
Okay, so then we said there is a fundamental part here about getting your SEO established correctly.
Yes.
Your search engine optimization. So I like the fact that we put, so we didn't really mention, but like the episode before this was, we just went through the list of the things that you need to do. We didn't get into any depth. Here we are we've reorganized that list and we've kind of bucketed things into similar themes and whatnot. SEO is definitely one of those things that needs to persist. You need to put, and you cannot just do it once and then say, great, that's done. And just like some of these other fundamentals, you're not going to do a bunch of research and then assume that nothing's going to change, right? Your SEO now needs to be structured around that same understanding of the market, the competition, the customers. What are they looking for? What are they asking for? How are they behaving? It's iterative. You have to have good analytics platforms in place in order to be able to understand whether or not it's working. You're going to gain insights about whether or not you discovered that people use a different word for your product or your service in the way you describe it. In technology, this happens all the time. We want to sort of make sure we're speaking very wholesomely and strategically about it, but sometimes our prospects are just looking for something really specific and tactical. So they'll be searching for email marketing when we do digital experiences. We need to make sure that we are, as a digital experience agency, talking about email marketing, or we'll miss the alignment with the prospect. And there's different times when that needs to align. So your SEO then sits on top of that intentional direction that's been set by your brand and your strategy, and your research. What have you learned about the keywords, the topics, the thought leadership that you want to establish now? And it needs to then kind of also reinforce some of that and say, well, listen, if we're going to be talking about that, let's make sure from an SEO perspective, we're not shooting ourselves in the foot, that we're supporting it by saying things and adding in the right sort of keywords and narrative, still being authentic to our own voice.
That's right. Not only are you giving that information to your prospects when you're reaching out to them, but when they are searching for this type of information, they're finding you to give them that information. So it's going round in that loop. It's like, oh yeah, they've contacted me to tell me this stuff. I've not heard this before about my market. I'll do some research. They go onto Google and they see your article on there, your white papers. Well, yeah, it's going to give a lot more value to them when they start to see those things.
Right. And then I think the last thing that is on the fundamentals list, I moved, I had influencer under fundamentals, but I just moved it to the next episode. I think it belongs more with like social media and whatnot. We can
makes sense,
more there. But the other fundamental part here is the follow-up and the nurturing sequence. So that is sort of a later step in the engagement, but talk to us about how that works and I think it's obvious, but just let's hear Andy's words on and encouragement for how to do this and why to do it.
Well, I think the ultimate key is making sure that if you're reaching out on the telephone or you're putting a product out there, such as a white paper or something that's providing information and adding value to a potential customer, is that you don't just leave it there. You're then, following up with email, you're following up with messages on social media, you're following up, and you have a plan for this. You have a structure and a step-by-step. So it's like, I did this phone call, I spoke to them, or I left a message. Okay, now what? Okay, if such and such has happened, then we follow up with this email. When we followed up with that email refers to that we will follow up with a phone call later on, and then you follow up with that phone call at that particular time. And that you are having different discussions at those points. You're not just repeating yourself over and over again. You're adding value at each stage of that, and that you have that sequence in place. And this doesn't need to stop if you then sign a contract with the customer, if you then start dealing with them, because even if you've secured their business, there's still potential for an outside influence to come in and take that business, and there's still a potential for you to sell more business with them. So always try and maintain that customer and that prospect as a prospect. So keep adding value to them, keep doing research, keep going around, and keep nurturing that relationship.
And after you've signed the contract, you get an opportunity to use that person as extension of your business brand, your sales effort, by turning them into an advocate. Not through any forceful way, but the more you can endear them to who you are, what you do, what you offer, the more they're going to mention it to somebody else.
Correct.
And this is not chasing. So the only thing I'll add into that is make sure your follow-up sequence has exit ramps. that either one of you can say, hold on, like this is not where we need to be right now. It might put you into a different lane, and it might be a reconnection further out in the future, but they're out of the sort of immediate follow-up sequence. I think it's really important to have some awareness of that kind of energy to be most effective in the long run.
Yeah. Very, very good. Very good. Well, thank you very much. That's the fundamentals thoroughly covered, and hopefully people have been paying attention and got some good value out of that. If you want to find out more about fundamentals of prospecting or any of the things that we talked about, please do go to tandtimbits.com and find alternative ways to get in touch with us there. Thank you very much, Scott.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
I clicked the wrong button. Started it that way, ending the episode that way. Let's try again. Starting off. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Scott.